de cartão de ponto.
Esse relógio tá certinho?
Sem relógio certinho. A próxima altura. Olha que interessante essa porta aqui de ferro. Aí aqui tem um pouco da história e depois eles levam para tudo lá dentro.
Steps. Well, guys, this whole thing here started in 1905, and this was the outside wall of the first power plant up in northern Florida. So it brought electric to Florida in 1905, and the building went all the way down the street here, and they ripped it down some years ago, but this was the outside wall of it. And then along about 1917, they built an ice plant, and the ice plant went from here all the way down the end of the building. Now, when they made ice in here, they made it in great big huge blocks, and it came clear up to here, and the workers actually worked up on top of the ice, and they had big wood planks they walked around in there. And they made big 250-pound slabs of ice here. They would take that ice, and they had the old crane that's still back in the production room there, but they would take that ice down to the end of the building and cut it up in chunks and use it in ice boxes and sell it all over town. They made ice here 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. They did 125,000 pounds of ice a day here. And then after a while, a train would pull in the back of this building, and they would take that ice and put it in the top of boxcars. And for the first time ever, they could take their shrimp and their fish and all the vegetables they make down here and ship it all over the United States. Before that, you could never ship this stuff out of here, but all they did before they ever got to Savannah, because of the heat down here. But that really opened the whole fishing business for this whole coast here. Well, they went along like that. In the late 40s, they invented the refrigerator and freezer, and everybody got one, and the ice plants all over the country started going out of business. This one operated up until 1959. And in 1959, one day the guys came in here and came to work, worked a full day, and hung their hat up at 5 o'clock, and this building sat here empty for 40 years. And for 40 years, hurricanes and storms and everything else beat this building till it was just a mess and a real eyesore in town. And along come a guy in 2008, and he said he's going to rip this down. He's going to build what Florida needed, another condo. Well, Florida don't need no more condos, but that was about the time of that housing bubble, and so he didn't get his financing. His bad luck ends up being our good luck. And two guys came along, Mike Diaz and Phil McDaniel, and they decided to put the first distillery in the state of Florida. Okay. Now, they didn't want any bank loans or federal grants or state loans or any of that kind of stuff, so they got 20 families in town, and 22 families in Saint Augustine pooled their money and built this distillery. So it's owned by 22 families in town. And it took them about 3 years just to restore this building. And everything that you see in here, 80% of it's all reclaimed stuff. The windows, those lights, the doors, everything you see in here today, the bars, whatever you see is reclaimed material. And in fact, you're sitting on pews from the old Baptist church down here. Oh, the iron. But so it took them 3.5 years, so we've been in business 4.5 years. Now, when they started this, each 22 families decided they wanted to do 3 things. First of all, it wasn't all just about making profit. They wanted to give back to town. Okay? And since we've been in business, we're one of the major supporters of the Lincolnville Museum in town. We helped start and we fund the amphitheater in town. We're a major contributor to And about 6 months ago, we took $67,000 of our profits out of the gift shop, and we built a Habitat for Humanity house. Now, there's 60 of us work here, and we gave 200 man-hours. We built that house, and that mom and her 2 kids, for the first time ever, she's got a house, and she moved in there a couple months ago. We love doing it, but we said we ain't gonna do it again in the summertime. It's pretty brutal. So they wanted to give back to the community. It wasn't just about making profits. And number 2 was they wanted to showcase Florida products. Everything we make here is made with Florida products. Now, our vodka is sugar cane, not potatoes. And our rum is sugar molasses from Florida. And then our bourbon, the wheat, and the corn all come right from Florida. We buy 2 products outside of Florida. The barley that goes in bourbon, barley doesn't grow in Florida. So we get that from Minnesota. And then in gin, there's a juniper berry that goes in there, and that comes from a place called Macedonia, which is over in Eastern Europe. And so they wanted to use Florida products, and they wanted to give back. And then the number 3 thing, they just wanted to make the best darn booze you possibly could. And since we've been in business 4.5 years, we've won 64 awards for our products. USA Today called our gin best gin in America 2 years in a row now. Our bourbon was just called by Esquire magazine, it's the best craft bourbon in America. We went out to San Francisco to the bourbon show out there, and there were 150 bourbons out there. They gave out 12 platinum medals. We won 1 of them. But we also won Best of Show. So I'll let you taste that today before you leave here. That's a real good bourbon. Now, we start production here real early in the morning because of the heat. And out here where the stills are, you can't have it air conditioned. It has to be warm. So it'll be a little warm out there, the humidity. If that bothers anybody, let me know, and I'll take you to an air-conditioned room, set you down, and give you a drink of water. I'm going to check with them, just say, okay, if it's okay for us to go out here. And out there, there's a yellow line. Just stay on this side of the yellow line. So let me check with them, and I'll be right back. They're finished for the day. We're good to go. When the last person just close the door, please.
Wow.
Just come all the way down, guys, if you will. I don't have anything like a microphone, I just yell. Okay. So come all the way down, guys. All the way down. All righty, come all the way down. Now this is where the magic happens in here. We start out with this big silver tank here, and we call it a mash tub. And in that mash tub, we put red winter wheat, we put corn, and we put the barley in there along with some water, and we cook it for about 5 to 6 hours. After about 5 to 6 hours, it's the consistency of oatmeal. And then we take that and we transfer it over to one of those silver tanks over there, and that's called fermentation tank, and we add yeast to it. Now the yeast gets to working on that corn and releases ethanol, and ethanol is alcohol. That's what we want. Along the back side of that, there's chilled water in there, running behind those tanks, because that yeast warms everything up, and we run cold water through there all the time to keep the temperature down. We're the only distillery in America that has zero wastewater. It takes a lot of water to make this stuff. But that water, when it heats up, we take it outside to a tank and bring it back in by reverse osmosis and filtering back into this tank to help with the refining process. It's about 5 days down here in those fermentation tanks, and then we move it to this big still right here. That still we call Betsy. She's named after one of the owner's grandmothers, and she was a good cook, and this is going to cook everything. Now, when you cook something on the stove and you have a lid on the top, you know the water gathers on the lid there. Same process here, except alcohol evaporates faster than water. So the alcohol will evaporate, and it'll go up the top of that still, and it'll come over to the silver part, and as it comes down the silver part, it turns into a liquid. When it's liquid, when they're doing production, that glass tank there will fill up with a clear liquid, and we need to move it over to this still, but the only way they know whether it's right to move it is by taste and smell. So every 15 minutes, a guy comes out here, one of our distillers, and he pours off some, and he tastes it, smells it. Now that's the only way to know when it's right. So these guys are so well at this, they know how to do it. And they move it over here. Now I wanted to be a taster. I started at 9:30, 11:30 they had to call me an Uber and send me home. When it's done, they'll move it over to this still, and this still we call Ella, after Ella Fitzgerald, the singer. She was a refined singer, and this is the refinery. Now when it's finished in the refining process, it comes out in three parts: the head, the heart, and the tail. The head is like white lightning. It's fingernail polish remover. It's brutal stuff on the top. Down in the bottom, it's like old soggy cardboard. But the middle, the heart, we pull out of there, and that's what goes in the barrel, okay? Now, I've got to tell you, down there in that corner is a small still. It's stainless steel, and that's what we do gin in. Gin can't be made in a copper still because of the way it is. So that's where we do our gin. Now this tank, I got to tell you something funny about this tank. When we finish cooking everything in there, we have all kind of corn left in the bottom. We call it spent corn. We've taken out everything out of it we need. Well, we buy our corn from a guy here in St. Johns County. He comes here about 2 to 3 days a week, and he takes all that spent corn out there and he feeds his cows out here. We got some of the happiest darn cows down here you ever. Actually, it's kind of unique what he does. He takes that spent corn, feeds the cows walk around and fertilize the fields, the corn grows, and we buy the corn. Like the circle of life. Now, if you look up here on top of this room right here, there's a silver tank up there. What we do, we're a small handcrafted distillery, and what we do, we take our spirits out of the barrel and we put it in that tank, and there's 2 sterile tubes come down there, and they go down into the bottling room, just done by gravity. Now we have 2 women that work in there every day inside the bottling room, and they fill the bottles, they cork the bottles, put the labels on them, put the plastic on them and put them in the cases, and we do 1,200 bottles a day. Now those big distilleries up north, they do 1,200 bottles every 5 minutes. Wow. So we're a real small handcrafted distillery. Now if you'll follow me, I'm going to cut through you here and we'll head down to the barrels. Excuse me.
1,200. 12 mil.
Caramba, é muito, hein?
Não, ele falou que destilaria grande faz 12 mil a cada 5 minutos.
Puxa. Sim. Uau, de barriga.
Taxes on everything here. All right, I'm on the way down. Now, the first thing you got to learn is all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. In 1964, Congress passed a law as to what can be called bourbon. And they said it was A, B, and C. A is the fact that it has to be made in America. You cannot make something in Scotland or Ireland or whatever and call it bourbon. Bourbon can only be made in America. Now some people think it's just in one state, but it's any place in the United States. Much like tequilas from Mexico and champagnes from France, bourbon's America's national drink, okay? So that was the A part of what Congress said, and then they said B, it had to be in a brand new barrel every time. You could never use a barrel twice. It has to be into a brand new white oak charred barrel. And then the C that they had in the ABC was corn. It had to be at least 51% corn. Ours is 60% corn, 22% red winter wheat, and 18% barley. Now we get our barrels out of Louisville, Kentucky, and they're handmade. They cut that white oak and they let that lay and set and cure for about 3 years, and then those guys take that and hand make each one of the barrels. When the barrel's finished, they'll turn it upside down and they build a wood fire under it, and they char the inside of that barrel. It's quite a skill that those guys have to char the inside of that barrel just to the way it should be. So we take our clear liquid and we put it in that barrel and let it begin to age. Up north, it gets much colder than it does here, and when you get to 40 degrees, bourbon stops working. It won't work anymore. It only gets 40 here, maybe 4 or 5 days a year. And our aging process is much faster than it is up north. With the storms and the humidity here, and there's a little bit of salt in the air all the time here, just the way that our conditions are down here, ours starts to mature much faster. Now we take that clear liquid, we put it in that barrel, and that barrel is almost alive, because for 3 years, and I'm only saying 3 years as an average, because a bourbon, each barrel individually is checked when it's time to bottle it. And they check the look, the taste, the alcohol content, a lot of different things before that barrel's ready to be taken to bottles. But we put that clear liquid inside that barrel, and for 3 years, that liquid goes in and out of that charring in the barrel. So at the end of the time, and like I said, 3 years is just an estimate, that's how it comes out in color. 100% of the color comes from the barrel, and 60% of the flavor comes from the barrel. Never is there ever an additive in bourbon to make this color. This is just how it comes out of the barrel. Our first bourbon that we made was called a double cask, because we started out in little 25-gallon barrels, and it aged way too fast, and then we moved it over to a 53-gallon barrel. And incidentally, all of our barrels are stored off-site. This is, we have some stuff in here, but mainly this is for show, okay, for tourism. All right. Now, some people ask me, what the heck do you do with all those barrels you have left over? You're only able to use them once. Well, we take these barrels and we send them all over town. And in town, there are 4 craft breweries in town, or what they call craft, I guess the microbrewery, that's what I was trying to think of. They put their beer in the bourbon barrel and leave it there for a while, and they have a very unique tasting beer with a bourbon flavor on it. But in town here, they also make coffee here in town, and there's coffee beans in bourbon barrels being set there, and it comes out with a coffee with a little bit of bourbon taste to it. But in town, they're making bourbon biscotti, bourbon cakes, bourbon honey, bourbon popcorn, bourbon barbecue sauce. If you buy something in Saint Augustine, it's got bourbon in it. Now, we take some of our barrels and we send them up to the San Sebastian winery up here. They take their port wine and put in that bourbon barrel, and they come out with a beautiful port-finished bourbon tasting wine. And the wine has got just a little bit of taste of bourbon. It's a beautiful wine. It's real good at San Sebastian Winery. Must be pretty good. Somebody drank this one. But then we bring some of the barrels down from the winery, from San Sebastian Winery. When our bourbon's done, it's 93.8 proof. But what we do after we get a finished bourbon, we'll put it in a port wine barrel and leave it there for 4 months. And it comes out with what we call our port finished bourbon. That's the one that won the deal out in San Francisco as best of show. That comes out at 108 proof, okay? Pretty strong, but they say it's real nice up north. Down here we say that's some fine sipping whiskey. It's real smooth. You'll get a chance to taste that before you leave here today. Anybody have any questions here? Well, I got a question for you guys. You want to taste some of this stuff?
Yes.
Okay, let's go.
É.
Appreciate you all coming today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Esse é um barzinho preparado.
All right, guys, I'm going to introduce you to your bartender. Hi, I'm Doug, your bartender. Well, what we're going to do, I'm going to wash my hands, and I want you to look over at that blackboard there. We're going to make you 3 drinks. We're going to make you a Fleur de Mule, a rum tiki cocktail, and a hibiscus spritz using our botanical gin in the hibiscus spritz. Now, each one of these drinks that you're going to taste today is going to be 1 part of our spirit, 1 part of our own mix, and 2 parts of bubbly water or soda water. Now, this is 80 proof, and this is what I told you was made out of sugar cane. Okay? Now, if we need a reason to drink vodka, it's gluten-free. And our mix
Gluten-free. That's perfect, huh?
Okay, well, you're not Moscow. Our mix is not ginger beer. It's ginger, cinnamon, lemon, and cayenne. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour these out, and if you would put your empties over on these trays there, because we're going to get on down through 3 drinks here. So, don't be bashful, just come on up and grab a Florida Mule. Thanks for being first. Good for her.
Don't be shy.
Deixa eu ver. Daí a gente divide.
Vamos provar.
Vai lá. Não vai tudo. Parte.
Que gostoso.
Vai.
Ai, baita bom. Provado.
Vai devagar. Deixa eu ver, dá um pouquinho aí.
Isn't that good stuff?
Bem gostosinho.
What do you guys think about that? It's good. That's pretty good.
Very good. Delicious.
Glad you like that. I got 3 left over here. If anybody
Tá bom?
wants an extra one, okay? Because I
É
have
bom?
to drink on
É
that.
com mel, ele falou, né? E limão.
There you go.
Alguma
Thank you
coisa.
for being here.
Ok.
All right, we're going to move on to rum now because I want you to try our rum tiki. That was 80 proof. We're going to move up to 84 proof. Our rum was clear. It was thin,
Não,
we put
80% de álcool. Acho que eu vou escapar isso daí. Eu vou passar.
84?
É, esse eu acho que eu
has a
passo.
straw color to it, but this rum here has a little bit of a butterscotch.
Outro é 108,
Now
mas
the
tem.
mix that I'm going to put this with has coconut cream, pineapple, vanilla, nutmeg, cinnamon, and it's going to have a little bit of almond in it. I'm telling you that is a foundation right there.
Tu vai provar.
One of the things about our mixes that I got to
A
tell
gente
you,
divide um
the
pouco para
mixes will
nós.
last
Tá.
about 14 days after you open it and it's in your refrigerator.
Então, é 22 famílias. Eu fiquei pensando enquanto ele estava falando isso, que seria um bom negócio para o vô, né? O vô que deveria ter aberto uma destilaria, que entendia tudo de álcool.
Some people
Guia
take
daí,
this
ele dá
mix
bem.
and fix it up in a nice
Ah,
cube
no meio,
and
pensei.
make frozen drinks.
Vai lá, vai lá.
So here we go, folks. This is
Pega o que tiver menos
rum
instinto, vai.
tiki.
Ele é bom de botar meu filho no copo, fica quase tudo do mesmo tamanho.
Vai, vai. Vai lá, vai lá.
Rum tiki. Come on up, guys, and grab one.
É,
Forte.
smell more alcohol.
Vai ser o último então, porque eu tô meio...
Já tá tudo.
Vou comer, né?
A gente comeu sanduíche. Mas não foi almoço.
Então.
O desgraçado é bom, mas é forte. É uma caipirinha super forte. É bom? É bom? É bom, olha a cor. Viu? É branco.
É, não é bem branco, né?
Well, what do you think about the rum tiki?
Rum tiki.
That's a pretty good tasting.
Very good. Rum tiki.
Uau.
Okay, folks, we're
Mas é
going to move
gostoso.
on to gin. Okay, now we were 80 proof, 84 proof. Now we're going to go up to 90 proof. We're going to start getting serious.